ಸಂಸಾರದಾವ ನಲಲಿಡಲೋಕ ತ್ರಾಣಾಯ ಕಾರುಣ್ಯ ಗಣ ಗಣತ್ವಂ ಭಕ್ತಸ್ಯ ಕಲ್ಯಾಣ ಗುಣನವಸ್ಯ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಮಹಾಪ್ರಭೋ ಕೀರ್ತನ ಗಿಟ್ಯ ಗೀತಾ ವಾದಿತ್ರ ಮಾದ್ಯಾನ್ ಮನಸೋರಸೇನಾ ರೋಮಾಂಚಕಾಂಪಾ ಋತರಂಗ ಬಾಜೋ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಶ್ರೀ ವಿಗ್ರಹಾರಾಧನ ನಿತ್ಯನಾನಾ ಸಿಂಗಾರತಾನ್ ಮಂದಿರಮ ಜನಾದೋ ಯುಕ್ತಸ್ಯ ಭಕ್ತಾಂ ಚ ನಿಯುಂಜತೋಪಿ ವಂದೇ ಗುರು ಶ್ರೀ ಚರಣಾರವಿಂದಂ ಚತುರ್ವಿಧಾ ಶ್ರೀ ಭಗವತ್ ಪ್ರಸಾದ ಸ್ವಾದಾನ್ನ ತೃಪ್ತಾನ್ ಹರಿಭಕ್ತ ಸಂಗಾನ್ कृतैव तृप्तिं भजता सदैव वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणारविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्नाम् प्रतीक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपास्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणारविन्दम् निकुञ्जयूनो रतिकेलिसिद्यै यायालि बेयुक्तिर् अपेक्षणीया तत्रादिदाक्षा अतिवल्लभास्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणारविन्दम् साक्षादरितेन्द्र समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तास्तथा भाव्यत एव साधि किन्तु प्रभोजा प्रिय एव तास्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणा यस्य प्रसादात् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादान्न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायान् सुवास्यं तस्य यशस्त्रीसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणारविन्दम् 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 नमः ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पश्चात्यादेशतारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसदि गौ Bhaktarinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय राधा नील माधव राधा नील माधव राधे, जय जगन्नाथा जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रमा जय सुदर्शना, जय सीताराम 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 लक्ष्मण हनुमान, जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह, जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय जय गौरनिताय, जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा, जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा, निताय गौर हरि बोल
Om Shnupada Brahmamsa Pratikacharya Ashtota Shata Shishimati's Divine Grace Aparchana Rinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Bhaktivedanta Institute Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Shnupada Brahmamsa Pratikacharya Ashtota Shata Shishimati's Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai. Nam Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premise Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Dada Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Parjabhumi Vrindavandam Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Mayapradam Ki Jai. Purushottama Chaitra Jagannath Dam Ki Jai. Shri Ayodhya Dam Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Samavrita Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glory to Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Prahlada Dadahine.
Prahlada Dadahine.
Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha.
Hiranyakashi Purvakshaha.
पार्वतीपते देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
गाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य
विष्णु भक्ति
देवी सत्यवताय
वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य विष्णु भक्तिपते देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
गाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य
विष्णु भक्तिपते
देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य विष्णु भक्तिपते देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
गाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
वृंदा देवी तुलसी महारानी की
जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियासी नमो नमः। तुलसी कृष्ण प्रियासी नमो नमः। राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो यही अभिलाषी। राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाबो यही अभिलाषी। ये तुम्हार शरण लो तारा वंश पूर्ण हो। कृपा कोरी कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी। मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंज दियो वास। नयने हेरी बो सदा जुगल रूप रासी। यही निवेदन धरो सखीर अनुगत करो सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी। दीन कृष्ण दासी कोई ये न मोरा होय। श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी। श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि कानि च पापानि प्रमाहत्यादिकानि च कानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्माद्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी नित्य गौर हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव जय जय गुरुदेव वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवश्च च विष्णु भक्ति प्रतिदेवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देव्याय प्रियाय केशवश्च च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवश्च च विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदे देवी तुलसी देवी महारानी की जय।
Make him a resident of Vrindavana. My desire also grant me residence in the precious groves of Shiva and Davanatham. Thus within my vision I shall always behold the beautiful Parsam Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me follow Karha dance of the Virgin. Please give me the privileged devotional service and make my own maid servant. This very fallen lowly servant of Krishna prays. May I always swim in the love of Shri Radha and Govinda. Srimati Tulsi Maharani ki jai. There are 10 fences in the matter of chanting holy names that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider the name of the demigods like Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, to be equal to an independent name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature pursuing the Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities and strength to chant the holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious ritualistic activities, offering the Veda fruity activities, karma, kanda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the glory of the holy name. 10. Not to let complete faith in chanting holy names, and to maintain material attachment in understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to intent about chanting. Every devotee who claims a Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just as I treat who can fulfill to everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned soul. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai. Cheto darpana marjanam bhavamaha tavakni nirvapanam Shriya kairava chantrika vitaranam vidyavatu jivanam Anandam buddhivardhanam pratipadam purnamita sadhanam Sarvatamasnapanam paravijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranina Kalaha Etadeshi Tavakripa Bhagavam Mamapi Durudevami Disham Yahajani Nanurakaha Trinatapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sashnuna Amanina Manatena Kirtaniya Sadaharihi Na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye. Mama jammani jammanishvare, bhavata bhaktir haituki tvayi. Ayi nanda tanuja kinkaram, patitam mam dishame bhavam buddha. Kripaya tava pada pankaja, sthita duri satisham vichintaya. Nayanam galadashuru daraya, vadanam gadgadarudaya gira. Pulakai nichitam vapurkada tava nama kahane bhavishati Yuga itam nimishena chakshusha pravisha itam Shunya itam jagat sarvam govinda virahe name Ashrishava padaratam pinnastu mam Adarsanam marmhatam karotu va Yatha tatha va vitatatu lampato mat prana nathastu se eva naparaha Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam ki jai.
Glory
to Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust of killing for years, and extinguishes fire of conditional life, or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone grants all benediction to human beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you have vested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out kindness enables us to easily approach you by holy name. But I am so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself Lord and joy in the street. One should be more taller than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready of all respect others. In such a state of mind, one can chant holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son of Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow I have fallen the ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death, and place me at once Adam to your lotus feet. O my Lord, while my eyes be decked with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant holy name, while my voice choke up, while hair my body stand end at recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling of separation and constant moment to be like a great millennium. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he shall remain so even he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything, everything, for he is always my worshipable Lord, unconditionally.
Shri Chaitanya Siksastakam Ki Jai. Shri Guru Pranama Prayers Ki Jai.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Shakham Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pachadadesha Tarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varsapani Videvi Daitaya Kripaptaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktita Shri Gaura Karana Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dina Darine Rupanuga Viruddha Pasithanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Saksha Vairagya Murtaye Vipalambara Sambodhe Padam Pujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gauravir Bhava Bhumistvam Nirdishta Satana Priyaha Vaishnava Savapama Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhischa Kripa Sindhupi Evacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishin Namaha Panchatatvadama Krishna Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakham Namami Bhakta Shaktikam He Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabanto Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pango Mamamanda Matergati Masarvasva Padam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vindaranya Kaupadurmadaha Shimadra Nagara Singhasanasto Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Pristharibi Sevamano Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsivata Tatastitaha Karsham Venu Sanergo Pir Gopinatha Shri Yestunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Tatara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai.
Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Anadyarādhya Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Parakara Satmasukha Praviksha Lakshariteshu Suravira Vipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Brahmasevimanam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Venum Kavanantam Aravinda Talaya Daksham Parhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Gantarpagoti Kamaniya Vishesha Shopam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Alola Chanta Kalasa Vanamarya Vamshi Ranangadam Panayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tripanga Lalitam Yata Prakasham Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pashanti Panti Kalayanti Chiram Chakanti Ananda Chimmaya Satujala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Advaitam Achotam Anadi Mananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedeshu Durapam Madurapam Atma Bhakto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Pantastu Koti Shatavassara Sampragamyo Vayurathapi Manaso Munipangavaanam Sopyasti Yaprapada Simya Vichinta Tatve Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Ekopya Sora Chaitum Jagatanta Kotim Yachakti Rasti Jagatanta Chayaya Danta Antantashta Paramanu Chayantarastham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manuchastateva Samprapya Rupa Mimasan Yana Pusha Sukteryam Eva Nikama Patitai Stuvanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Ananta Chimme Rasa Patibhavitapi Stape Evan Jarupa Daya Kalapi Goloka Evan Javasatti Kilatma Bhutto Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami Premanjana Churuta Bhakti Vilochanena Santa Sadeva Hitayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundam Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pachami Ramadi Murtishu Kalanyamena Tishtan Nanavataram Akaro Puvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samapava Parama Pumam Yo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Pajami.
Krishna, who is known as Govinda, it's the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal, blissful, spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he's the prime cause of all causes.
Enlightened by the recollection of I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire in abodes built with spiritual germs, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with the great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids.
Anyone? I worship Govinda.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. Round those whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers, beautified with
good. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the other organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha. Yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. Only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis, who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane, extending over thousands of millions of years.
He is an undifferentiated entity, and there is no distinction between potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of the millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present. He is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universes at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord who I adore.
Very good.
I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas, by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities in the company of her confidants, Sakhis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever blissful spiritual rasa.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Yamasundara, Krishna himself with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love.
Very good.
I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifested himself personally as Krishna and the different avatars in the world in the form of Rama, Narasimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions.
Very good. Glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. We can recite together. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Taratas Chartesu Avikya Swarat. Tene Brahma Hidaya Adikavaye Muyantiyat Suraya Tejo Varimidam Yadminayo Yisako Sa Damna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dimahi. Anybody?
O my Lord, Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into the illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representation of water seen in fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existence in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Very good. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.2. Dharma prochita kaitravo cha paramo nimutranam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapo trayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kimba Prader Ishvaraha Sadyo Vidya Varudyate Cha Kriti Vihi Susubis Dakshanat. Somebody?
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavat Puran propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of the Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Very good. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.3. Nigama kaparo kalitam phalam sukhamukad amritam ratisam nitam pritibhata vamrasarajara murado rasakabhuvi avakaha.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls.
Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verses 17. Shinvadam Sampata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hilyantaksto Bhadrani Vidunati Suhit Satam Nasta Preso Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamasloke Bhakti Bhagavati Naistiki Tadarajastamo Bhavo Kamalo Badayasche Chetatayana Vitam Sipam Sattve Prasaditi Evam Prasana Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogada Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam Muktasana Sujayate Vidyate Hridaya Grantishchijante Samsaya Siyante Sarvasmani Krishna Evat Manishware. Anybody would like to read?
To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best wishing friend and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly.
Very good.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of Asamsayam Samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth, Personality of Godhead. Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness can one understand the science of Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Glory to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantaraj ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
So today we're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, verse number 36? 37. Well, we're going to do 36 first because it's important. Sana prasadatam Brahmo
Sana Prasadatam Brahmo
Bhagavan Urvanugraha
Bhagavan Uranugraha
Vyadasya Anukam Jnanam
Vadasya Pinukam Pranam
Strinam Deva Satipati
Srinam Deva Satipati
Sa
Sa
He Na
with us
Prasidatam
Prasidatam
Be pleased
be pleased
Rama
Brahma
Brother-in-law
brother-in-law
Bhagavan
Bhagavan
Personality of all opulence
personality of all opulences
Uru
Guru
Very great
very great
Anugraha
Anugraha
Merciful
merciful
Vyadasya
Vadasya
of the hunter
of the hunter
Api
Api
also
also
Anukam Jnanam
Anukam Pranam
of the objects of mercy
the objects of the mercy
Strinam
Srinam
of the women
of the women
Deva
Deva
the worshipable Lord
the worshipable Lord
Satipati
Satipati
the husband of Sati
the husband of Sati
the chaste
the chaste.
Translation by His Divine Grace C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Anyone can read. Go ahead. Somebody.
Let him be pleased with us, since he is my brother-in-law, the husband of my sister Sati. He is also the worshipful Lord of all women. He is the personality of all opulences and can show mercy towards women who are excused even by the uncivilized hunters. Purport. Lord Shiva is the husband of Sati, one of the sisters of Diti. Diti invoked the pleasure of her sister Sati so that Sati would request her husband to excuse her. Besides that, Lord Shiva is the worshipable Lord of all women. He is naturally very kind towards women, on whom even the uncivilized hunters also show their mercy. Since Lord Shiva is himself associated with women, he knows very well their defective nature, and he might not take very seriously this unavoidable offense, which occurred due to her faulty nature. Every virgin girl is supposed to be a devotee of Lord Shiva. Diti remembered her childhood worship of Lord Shiva and begged his mercy.
Okay, so this is continuation of all the clever arguments Diti, who is an extremely intelligent lady, is making to try and whitewash something that's completely wrong and to make it look as if it can be excused. So, only very, very clever people can make arguments like this. And she is definitely a very intelligent lady. But she's made such an egregious offense that it's very hard to excuse it. And it would be a very bad example if it is excused. In other words, we see that the most sinful thing a person can do is to engage in illicit sexual activity. That's like the worst thing you can do. Unfortunately, it's something that many people do today. And it even happened in the past, even in the presence of such great devotees as Kashyapa Muni and Iti. So, you don't make something right by making two things wrong. So, first of all, definitely wrong what Diti did. She enticed her husband, who was an advanced devotee, but he was somewhat of an impersonalist. And he had a tendency to be attracted by the physical beauty of his wife. So, she was able to convince him to commit a very sinful act. But you don't make something right by two wrongs. You make something right by correcting the wrong thing in the first place. Two wrongs don't make a right. That makes sense, doesn't it? How can you make two mistakes and eventually make it right? It's not possible. So that's what she's trying to do, and she's very good at it. And she's making tremendous efforts by trying to get the support of third persons. But unfortunately for her, fortunately for the history of the Vedic civilization, two wrongs don't make a right. So therefore, no matter how strong or how convincing her arguments are, ultimately they're not going to be accepted by Lord Shiva. Okay, so here it says, the way people make impelling arguments is by invoking the names of advanced people. And so obviously the name of Lord Shiva is the name of one of the most advanced persons in the whole universe. So he says, Lord Shiva is the husband of Sati, one of the sisters of Diti. Diti invoked the pleasure of her sister Sati so that Sati would request her husband to excuse her. So you see how she's trying to put pressure on Shiva through the wife of Shiva. And obviously, Diti knows all the great personalities of the universe because she's born in a very high family. And she's associated with all these very advanced devotees. So she's trying to get the sympathy of Lord Shiva through his wife, Sati. Then it says, besides that, Lord Shiva is the worshipable Lord of all women. Another good point. It's a fact. Women traditionally, Vedic tradition, worship Lord Shiva to get a good husband. He is naturally very kind towards women, on whom even the uncivilized hunters also show their mercy. Whoa, that's a real strong point. She's trying to say, well, even hunters, they also sometimes show mercy to women. So in other words, she's pointing the finger now at Lord Shiva. How can you punish me when the hunters, the most sinful people, they also sometimes show mercy to women that make mistakes. Since Lord Shiva is himself associated with women, he knows very well their defective nature. Well, wait a minute. The whole purpose of Krishna consciousness is to purify the defective nature of people. It's not to give a pass. Oh, well, you just did something really sinful. Oh, we'll forget about it. No, we're not going to forget about it. How can you forget about it? That means you condone it. So you can't undermine the whole Vedic culture by simply very clever and impelling, let's say, points, although they seem to be very convincing. You can't make something wrong right by ignoring the fact that it's wrong. You have to make people understand, look, you made a big mistake, and this is a very big mistake. It's a very bad example for the practice of Krishna consciousness. So it must be, there must be some punishment involved, or if not, if you don't want to call it punishment, some kind of rectification that has to take place. You can't just ignore such an egregious sinful activity. Since Lord Shiva is himself associated with women, he knows very well their defective nature, and he might not take very seriously Diti's unavoidable offense, which occurred due to her faulty nature. Well, wait a minute. Unavoidable defense? That's trying to, again, whitewash the whole event of Diti's illicit sexual, let's say, activity with her husband. Diti's unavoidable offense, which occurred due to her faulty nature. Every virgin girl is supposed to be a devotee of Lord Shiva. Diti remembered her childhood worship of Lord Shiva and begged his mercy. Well, yeah, I mean, Lord Shiva is not mean, but he also has to maintain the principles of Sanatana Dharma. We can't just say, well, we'll excuse this one, we'll excuse that one, we'll excuse this one, we'll excuse that one. Make a joke of the whole thing. Just like at one point Prabhupada said, I am no longer going to perform any I'm no longer going to sit down and take part in wedding of devotees. Why? Because too many devotees were falling down, engaging in illicit sex, and making a joke of the sanctity of the vow of marriage. So he stopped at a certain point, you know. And rightfully, you can't make a joke out of something that is very, very sinful. And the greatest sin that people can perform is to have illicit sex. Of course, today, everyone wants to say, like, you have these magazines for women, in which you have these women who are PhDs, and they're writing articles like, well, you don't really cheat on your husband by engaging in an illicit activity with another man. It actually strengthens your attachment to your husband. What? Are you crazy? Have you ever read any of the ladies? Have you ever read those types of magazines that with PhD women making such crazy points? Anybody? No? Well, you're lucky. Huh?
They teach in school that they think is normal. So
That,
what
yeah.
are they teaching? They made more of education, flash education, at least in our neighboring school district, is to enable them to have healthy relationship and have dating. So what more?
Well, are they advocating having illicit relationships? I'm not sure about that. I'm talking about PhD women who are being paid very well to write articles in which they are professing that there's nothing wrong with the woman having extramarital sex. In fact, it makes her marriage stronger. This is like completely crazy. You know. Now, I'm not going to ask you to look it up, but if you want to, do that on your own, you can. And you'll see this is going on in this country on a big scale. And just because somebody has a PhD, that doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. Just like previously, companies would hire PhDs to write articles saying that smoking is not bad for your health. Guess who were paying those PhDs? Cigarette companies. So you can find anybody, and even a PhD, and bribe them, and they'll write whatever you want. So this goes on many different levels. They will recommend drugs that are actually bad for you. They will recommend behaviors that are actually sinful. But they use all their PhD acumen or expertise to make something wrong seem to be right. Now here we see, DT is also expert at this. She's trying to make something wrong seem to be all right by appealing to people in high levels, like the wife of Lord Shiva, right? And so forth. Okay, so then it says, DT's unavoidable offense. I'm sorry. Every virgin girl is supposed to be a devotee of Lord Shiva. DT remembered her childhood worship of Lord Shiva and begged his mercy. Well, yes, young girls in India, at least previously, they were recommended to worship Lord Shiva so they could get a good husband. She did that, and she did get a good husband. But she was able to corrupt her husband, Kashyapa Muni, who was an advanced yogi. He was not exactly an advanced devotee. He was an advanced yogi, and he was also an impersonalist. Now, there are bona fide impersonalists and unbona fide impersonalists. The unbona fide impersonalists are usually the Mayavadis, in most cases. They don't believe that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They don't believe there's anything beyond Brahman realization, the impersonal light emanating from the body of Lord Krishna. So those are unbona fide impersonalists because they're denying the existence of Krishna. And then you have the bona fide impersonalists who are not like the nonsense Mayavadis. They don't claim that there's nothing beyond Brahman. They say, look, we don't know, but when our spiritual master or spiritual masters instruct us, then we will have an open mind and be educated. It's just like a person says that it's impossible to be able to go to the moon. Well, is it impossible to go to the moon? In other words, impossible is not in the devotee's dictionary. So to say something is impossible is actually a wrong statement. Everything is possible if it is permitted by Krishna. But if you don't follow Krishna's instructions, then it becomes impossible. So, therefore, it's important that we keep an open mind. The Mayavadis have a closed mind. They say, well, this is the limit of all knowledge, impersonal Brahman. There's nothing beyond that. And Krishna, when he appears in the material world, he has a material body, just like we do. In other words, they're completely destroying the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and making everything seem as if there's only Narakar, impersonalism. There is impersonalism, but it is not the end of all knowledge. So the people that try and say, well, here's the limit, you can't go beyond this limit, they're actually bluffing. Krishna can make anything wrongs right. He has that power. We don't have that power. Now, does that mean deity has that power? No, she doesn't have that power. She makes very good, clever arguments, but she does not have the power to make something wrong right. Now, when we say Krishna can make something wrong right, that doesn't mean that he is a mundane person like deity. It means that it's like the sun. The sun can purify urine and stool. Now, those things, I mean, can you purify urine and stool? Doesn't seem like you can do it. Right? But Krishna can do it because he has absolute powers. So, not everybody has those powers. In fact, very few people have those powers. And therefore, we don't say that everybody has the power of making something wrong right. So that's the problem here with deity. She doesn't have the power. She doesn't have the purity. She doesn't have the let's say ability to make something wrong right. So therefore, to do something wrong on the level of what she did is very sinful, and it must be rectified. It cannot be ignored. Okay. Are there any questions about that? So we'll go on to text number 37. 36? No? What? Okay, I'm sorry.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So here it is said that Didi's unavoidable offense.
What?
Here it is said that Didi's unavoidable offense.
I don't understand what you said.
DT is unavoidable offense.
DT is
Didi's unavoidable offense.
unavoidable offense. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So from a bigger perspective, can we think that Didi is...
Wait a minute, that's her opinion. You see, that doesn't mean that it's an unavoidable offense. That's her opinion. Go ahead.
So can we think that Didi was just an instrument in an instrument playing for a bigger plan by Krishna, because everything is happening due to the curse of Kumaras, right?
I don't know how you're coming up with this theory, but when it says DT's unavoidable offense, it's not an unavoidable offense. If you follow Krishna consciousness, you will not commit an offense like that. You see, you have to be careful about how people use language. They can use language in different ways to make something wrong seem to be right. And if you can't see the fallacy or the wrong, the level of wrongness of something, then you get confused. And then you get on this slippery slope where everything becomes excusable, even illicit sex, you see. So there are certain things that cannot be excused. Therefore, what are they? No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. There's no equivocation there. There's a big no in front of each one of those things. So if we engage in those type of activities and try and make it seem as if, well, we can skip this one, and next time we won't make the same mistake. No, we can't skip this, because you establish a principle that it's okay to engage in some illicit activity that you promised at initiation never to do. You see, so there's no excuse. DT has no excuse here. Nor do we, as devotees who have taken initiation, have any excuse. Now you might say, well, that's why I don't want to take initiation, because I don't want to be in such a situation like that. I'll chant Hare Krishna, I'll do this, I'll do that, but I'm not going to take initiation and make a vow that I'm still attached to. In other words, make a vow that of something that I'm still capable of doing, because I have a tendency to do that. So, we can't play games with spiritual truth. The 4 regulative principles are something that we, at initiation, promise that we'll never do. Now, if we do those things, then we have to be rectified. We have to be corrected, because they're very, very sinful. So, now, does that answer your question or not?
Yes, Maharaj. Actually, my thinking was that Kumaras curse Jaya Vijaya and to become demons. For that, a womb is required. And Diti was chosen for that plan.
Who chose her?
I don't know. Lord was also there at that.
You said the right thing. I don't know. That's a mistake. No. Every person has limited free will. You have it, I have it. If today I choose not to commit some sinful activity and don't do it, that's my free will. But tomorrow I might decide to engage in illicit activity. You see, so that's why it says, Nasta prayasu bhagresu nityam bhagavata seva. Bhagavati atamasloke bhakti bhakti. Nice. That by following Krishna consciousness, you can almost eliminate all sinful activities. Why does it say almost eliminate? Because you have free will. So Diti had free will, and she made a bad mistake. She violated something that is not supposed to be violated. Therefore, it cannot be excused. Otherwise, you start excusing things like that, and you basically are contaminating the practice of pure devotional service. Like, for example, if you say, well, it's all right to every once in a while kill an animal and eat it. Who cares? It's just an animal. No. You can't just make decisions like that. You can make the decision, but it's a wrong decision. It's a violation of the principles of ahimsa. So, either we're going to learn what the rules and regulations are and follow them, or we're going to be like Diti and say, well, I'll give you an example. One time, there was a man that wanted to have a tattoo of a chicken on his back. So he went to the tattoo man's and said, I want you to put a chicken on my back. Make a tattoo. And the tattoo man said, oh yeah, no problem. So then he got his pins ready and his inks ready. And he said, okay, you ready? I'm going to start. And the man said, yeah, go right ahead. So he went, tick, like that. He said, ouch. He said, what was that? He said, well, I'm beginning to make the chicken. He said, well, that hurt a lot. He said, leave that part out. I said, okay. So he was working on the head of the chicken. So then he said, what are you going to do next? He said, well, I'm going to work on the left wing. I said, okay. So he went tick like that. He said, oh, ouch. He said, what was that? He said, I just told you, I'm working on the left wing of the chicken. He said, no, leave it out. It hurt too much. So every time the tattooist would put the pin into the skin with the ink, the man said, ouch. He said, leave that out. Finally, the tattoo guy threw down his instrument and said, even God can't make a chicken like the one you want. So leave this out, leave that out. Eventually you end up with nothing, you see. So we can't, let's say, play games with the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. We have to follow them. If we follow them, we won't have any problems in our life because we'll be protected by Krishna. But if we don't follow them, then we give an example to others. And then they say, well, so-and-so doesn't do this, so-and-so doesn't do that. So why do I have to do that? Just like when your parents are watching television and they tell their child, okay, go upstairs, do your homework right away. So the kid says, okay. So he goes upstairs. They're watching the Super Bowl, parents are, and the boy has to do his homework. He says, now I understand. They can watch the Super Bowl, but I got to do my homework. I said, this is nonsense. So the kid can understand that the parents are doing something nonsense, but they want him to do something good sense. So that doesn't work. That's the wrong example. So there are things that you cannot violate. And if you do, there has to be some rectification. Do you accept that?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Any other questions? So I hope none of you go to a tattoo artist and have a chicken on your back. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go on next. Let's just read the English. Anybody? Text 37.
Translation. Maitreya said, the great sage Kashyapa thus addressed his wife, who was trembling because of fear that her husband was offended. She understood that he had been dissuaded from the daily duties of offering evening prayers, yet she desired the welfare of her children in the world.
Okay. So again, misery likes company. Diti does something wrong that's really wrong, convinces her husband to also engage in that really egregious wrongness. The great sage Kashyapa thus addressed his wife, who was trembling because of fear that her husband was offended. She understood that he had been dissuaded from his daily duties of offering evening prayers, yet she desired the welfare of her children in the world. So, again, two wrongs don't make a right. So, Diti made a mistake. Her husband, she convinced her husband to make the same mistake. And now she was able to make him break his normal practice of Krishna consciousness. Just like sometimes you have these types of devotees that try and convince other devotees to make a mistake. Like, for example, when I first joined Krishna consciousness about 55 years ago, I had to follow the four regulative principles. So at that time, there was more or less the beginning of the movement, not the exact beginning, but it was an early time in Krishna consciousness. So there was only one toilet in the men's or boys' ashram, and as soon as you would go into the toilet and close the door, immediately someone would knock on the door. Right. So I was a new devotee. So at that point, there was a principle. Principle was that there's what's called a rogi, a bogi, and a yogi. A rogi, a bogi, and a yogi. So, what's a rogi? A rogi is a person who passes stool more than once in a day. And what's a bogi? A rogi is someone who's passing stool a lot because they're sick. Number two, then there's the bogey. The bogey is passing stool more than once a day. And there's the yogi, who only passes stool once a day at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, besides the four regulative principles, it just so happened in the brahmachari ashram that there was this principle, rogi, bhogi, and yogi. So, I didn't know much about Krishna consciousness. I had just joined. So, it's my turn to go to the toilet. I close the door, and before I can even sit down, someone's knocking on the door. Which means, hurry up. So that put me so much in anxiety that I wasn't able to do anything. And now I had to wait 24 hours because you're only a yogi if you pass stool once a day, 4 o'clock in the morning. So this went on for about 3, 4, 5, 6 days. Obviously I was in deep anxiety. So I went up to the temple commander and I said, Prabhu, I don't think I can continue in Krishna consciousness. He said, why not? I said, because I can't follow all the regulations. He said, oh, is it sex? I said, no. Oh, well, is it meat eating? I said, no. Is it intoxication? I said, no. He said, well, what is it? I said, it's that rule that you can only pass stool once a day, 4 o'clock in the morning. He said, what? He said, who told you that? He said, well, all the brahmacharis, that's what they say. You're rogi or bhogi or a yogi. He said, that's complete nonsense. There's no rule like that. I said, what? How can you say that? All the brahmacharis, they talk about it. He said, no. He said, just ignore that. You have 4 regulative principles that you promised. No meat eating, no gambling, no illicit sex, no intoxication. There's no such thing as rogi, bhogi, yogi. So these are type of made up principles that somehow or other just happen. And unless you have advanced devotees, it becomes a principle. And you think that you have to follow it. See? Now, is there a rule about passing stool? No, but obviously if you're passing stool 5, 6, 8 times a day, there's something wrong. Right? But that can be rectified with some doctor's advice or whatever. But there's no rule on the level of, no illicit sex, no gambling, concerning how to pass stool. So unless we have advanced devotees advising us, it's very easy that these mythological ideas, these false ideas, enter into the movement and seem to become rules that have to be followed, that are actually nonsense. Okay? So here, she understood that he had been dissuaded from his daily duties of offering evening prayers, yet she desired the welfare of her children in the world. Wow, who doesn't want the welfare of their children, right? But that's not an excuse by which you can violate the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness. Right? Okay, so we'll read next one. Somebody can just read the English.
The learned Kasyapa said, because of your minds being polluted, because of defilement of the particular time, because of your negligence of my directions, because of your being apathetic
apathetic
to the demigods, everything was inauspicious.
Now Kashyapa is really giving it to his wife. Right. Go ahead.
Purport by his divine grace. Yes,
This is a very important purport, very profound.
The conditions for having good progeny in society are that the husband should be disciplined in religious and regulative principles, and the wife should be faithful to the husband. In Bhagavad Gita 7.11, it is said that sexual intercourse, according to the religious principles, is a representation of Krishna consciousness. Before engaging in sexual intercourse, both the husband and wife must consider their mental condition, the particular time, the husband's direction, and obedience to the demigods. According to Vedic society, there is a suitable auspicious time for sex life, which is called the time for Garbhadana. Diti neglected all the principles of scriptural injunction, and therefore, although she was very anxious for auspicious children, she was informed that her children would not be worthy to be the sons of a Brahmana. There is a clear indication herein that a Brahmana's son is not always a Brahmana. Personalities like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu were actually born of Brahmanas, but they were not accepted as Brahmanas because their fathers did not follow the regulative principles for their birth. Such children are called demons or Rakshasas. There were only one or two Rakshasas in the previous ages due to negligence of the disciplinary methods. But during the age of Kali, there is no discipline in sex life. How then can one expect good children? Certainly, unwanted children cannot be a source of happiness in society. But through the Krishna consciousness movement, they can be raised to the human standard by chanting the holy name of God. That is the unique contribution of Lord Chaitanya to human society.
Hari Bol, thank God. You see, Lord Chaitanya comes and he can save even the children born of sinful activity. That's the power of the holy name. We don't recognize how powerful the chanting of the holy name of Krishna is. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, there are, however, limits. Like, for example, there was this one married gentleman in Berkeley, California, and he was a Brahmana. He was also a pujari. And one night, he did not come to the temple, although he lived in the temple. He and his wife lived in the temple. So, he missed his service also. So that's a pretty serious thing, especially if you're a pujari. And you miss your service and you don't tell anybody. Therefore, the service was not done, or they did it at the last minute somehow. So the question was, as I was temple president, when I saw him the next day, I said, "Well, Prabhu, what happened? Where were you?" He said, "Oh, I was doing some special preaching." I said, "How special was that preaching? Because you missed your service." He said, "Well, it was pretty important." I said, "Well, what was it exactly?" He said, "Well, I was preaching this one lady." I said, "A lady? So you talking about your wife? She was worried about you because you didn't come home last night." He said, "No, there was this other lady that I met, and I was doing a lot of special preaching." So it turns out that he was engaged in illicit activities with this other woman. Although he's a pujari, although he's brahmana, although he's initiated, etc. So I said, well, how come you stayed away all night long? He said, well, she kept asking a lot of questions. But actually the truth was, he and this lady were arrested by a policeman who saw them engaging in illicit activity in a car. So, somehow or other, they were let loose, and that's why he was back again the next day. But it took time to figure out all this, and then it turns out that I told him, look, you've committed a very serious offense. He said, no, I know how to chant Hare Krishna. I said, what? What do you mean you know how to chant? I mean, what does that have to do with the sinful thing you did? He said, well, I can rectify anything just by chanting Hare Krishna. No. Not when you purposely violate the rules and regulations in such a terrible way. You can eventually, maybe, but you have to be rectified. You have to go through a process of purification. So his process was, I can commit as many sins as I want, but as long as I chant Hare Krishna, it's going to make everything right. Is that a fact? No. The rule Prabhupada the rule that Prabhupada made was 3 strikes and you're out. In other words, yes, we neophyte devotees, we come from a very low background, so it's possible that we'll make mistakes. But there's no thing as, as many mistakes as you want. If you make the same mistake 3 times in a row, we can excuse it the first time, we may excuse it the second time, we may excuse it the third time. There's no excuse on the 4th time. And the excuse means that you take shelter of a advanced devotee and you strictly follow all the rules and regulations so you don't make that mistake again. So it might be 1, 2, 3, but 4th time it's not going to be excused anymore. Okay, so here it says, but through the Krishna consciousness movement, they meaning who? The children who are born of illicit sex, they can be raised to the human standard. That human standard is following the regulative principles and chanting Hare Krishna. By chanting the holy name of God, that is the unique contribution of Lord Chaitanya to human society. Okay, are there any questions about this, or comments, or discussion?
Maharaj, Hare Krishna. Maharaj, here, apathetic to demigods, everything was inauspicious is there in the translation.
You know what the word apathetic means?
Apathetic to demigods.
I know. Do you know what the word apathetic means?
Not respecting something.
Right, yeah. Apathetic means you don't pay attention to it. So, look it up. Look up the dictionary. Apathy means it's nonchalant. You don't take it really seriously.
Showing or feeling no interest, enthusiasm or concern.
Right. So now you know what the word apathetic means. So, and because of, I mean here, Kashyapa Muni, he's really blaming his wife. But he also made a mistake, right? but anyway, he's giving it to his wife. He says, and because of your being apathetic to the demigods, everything was inauspicious. Right? So we see how it's easy to blame another, but even though you make the same mistake. So there is a way of having good children. It's a science. That science is performing the Garbhodhan samskar before copulation. And it's a very specific process and based on chanting Hare Krishna. So it says that before engaging in sexual intercourse, both the husband and wife must consider their mental condition, the particular time, the husband's direction, and obedience to the demigods. According to Vedic society, there's a suitable auspicious time for sex life, which is called the time for Garbhodana samskar. Diti neglected all the principles of scriptural injunction, and therefore, although she was very anxious for auspicious children, she was informed that her children would not be worthy to be sons of a Brahmana. In other words, they would be born demons. And that's what happened, the first two demons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Now Prabhupada is saying, but in the past, there were only one or two Rakshasas in the previous ages due to negligence of the disciplinary methods. But during the age of Kali, there's no discipline in sex life. How then can one expect good children? Certainly unwanted children cannot be a source of happiness in society. But through the Krishna consciousness movement, even though they're born in inauspicious ways, but through the Krishna consciousness movement, they can be raised to the human standard by chanting the holy name of God. That is the unique contribution of Lord Chaitanya to human society. Thank God Lord Chaitanya appeared. There is hope for everyone. Any questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I think the four regulative principles, if you look at other teachings of Hinduism or like other religions, also kind of talk about it. But why do they not talk about the regulated sex life, like especially between a husband and a wife, like that? I mean, what I read here on these in these scriptures of Krishna consciousness, they're not repeated in other places. They say, yes, you cannot have a relationship.
You mean other religions?
Other religions maybe. Or maybe I didn't understand that, or I didn't come across, is, yes, you cannot have sex with outside marriage, or before marriage, outside marriage, and those things you hear, but like regulation in sex life, even within a married life. So that's very particular that I read here. So I was just wondering why it is not common in other things, or maybe they're not representing it the same way.
Because they deviated. They deviated. That's the problem. Just like the idea that there's a rogi, bogi, and yogi, it's a rule that was not there in the Shastras, but it was made a rule by some people. And then other people unwittingly followed the rule also. So it's very important that you associate with bona fide devotees. If not, you will not get the correct understanding of what is right and what is wrong. And this is Kali Yuga, it's the age of hypocrisy and quarrel. What does that mean? It's an age where people are lying and they're arguing that they're not lying. So what's going to happen in an age like that? There's going to be unlimited, what you call unlimited unlimited, let's say, changes that completely destroy the purity of practice of Krishna consciousness. Hypocrisy and quarrel. They're lying and they're arguing that they're not lying. And I gave the example the other day of Bill Clinton and others that bold-faced lie. They get caught, right? But then they sort of, joke their way out of it somehow or other. But there's no way Dee Dee can joke her way out or can talk her way out or can persuade her way out. She's going to be, there's going to be a severe, let's say, rectification that she has to go through. But because this is the worst age to take birth in, Kali Yuga, you have Lord Chaitanya who appears and makes it easy for people to become purified if they want to. It's simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. But even there are limits. 1, 2, 3, you're out. Right? Now, out doesn't mean you're out forever, but you could be excused 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4th time you're not going to be excused. You're going to have to do some serious rectification for making a habit of violating the rules and regulations. Now, yesterday also, you asked the question, Mataji. Say, aren't people afraid of the wrath of God? Right? Is that what you said yesterday? Huh? Fear of God. Well, the answer is no, because they don't believe in God. This is what you have to understand. They're taught not to believe in God. This is taught in school, number 1. They don't talk about God in school because scientists cannot verify the existence of God. Number 2, they also say that when you die, there's nothing. Those 2 points are enough to make anybody, any kid, an atheist, you see. Because, first of all, they create a false standard. Science, mundane science. If mundane science cannot verify the existence of God, then for people who follow mundane science, there's no God. And when you die, there's nothing. There's no spiritual world, there's no God, there's no hell, this, that. Well, now you've become complete atheist. So you don't have any fear of God because you don't think God exists. You don't believe that there's Yamaraj. There are consequences for committing sinful activities. So they've created this false image, or this false, let's say, habitude of violating the most serious sinful activities like illicit sex, and they don't feel guilty. They don't feel fear of God. They don't believe there's a God. You see the point? So that was the answer. That where's the fear of God? There's no fear of God. They don't believe God exists. That's what's going on today. And what does Prabhupada do? He comes and says, no, God does exist. His name is Krishna. And he's a very loving, transcendental person, and you can get his mercy. Mercy by his incarnation as Lord Chaitanya. You just simply chant Hare Krishna in the association of devotees and follow the regulative principles, and even the worst person can become the best person, or as they say, the Adama can become the worst person can become the best person. The Adama can become Uttama. So that's the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Even the worst person can become purified. Even people that are in hell, they can be rectified and taken out of hell. Whereas the Christians say, oh, once you're in hell, that's it, you're done. So you see, where is their actual mercy? If you want to study what mercy is, you have to study the mercy Lord Chaitanya has given in the age of Kali. That's the real mercy. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So the answer to your question is, many other religions have deviated. And there's no acharya to correct them. The acharyas, so-called acharyas, are going along with the deviation. Haribol. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande Haribol. So the main point to understand is there's always a right way and a wrong way. If we learn and follow the right way, we'll never have a problem. If we ignore the right way and try and make the wrong way the right way, there's only going to be problems. It will never work. Haribol.
Sri Guru Cherana Padma Ivala Bakati Sadna Dandamu Isavadana Mate Jehara Prasadi Bai E Baba Turiya Jai Krishna Prapti Hoi Jaha Hote Guru Mukha Padma Vakya
চিত্তে করিয়া কিয়া নারায়ণা করিহ মানি আশা শ্রী গুরু চেরানিরতি এসে উত্তমাগতি जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्वाशा जे प्रसादे पूरे सर्वाशा चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते आविद्या विनाशा जाते विधि गाय जहरा चरितो करुणा सिंधु आदम जे नारा बंधु श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदमाजे नारा बंधु लोकेना लोके राजीवाना यह प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पादा छाया विचास गुसुक त्रिभुवाना तेरा प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमः विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्यति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवी
गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा श्री अद्वैता गणधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Ramo Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nityai Gaura Hari Bol.